Well, you've just described, it's hard to coordinate 3 children. Now you have probably 19. You have more, but direct contact with 19 big organizations, each of which has their own company goals in mind, and they have to report on those, but also adhere to the shared goal. It's very challenging. The coordination is effective as long as you keep communication going. That's number 1. Number 2, the communication helps you to remain transparent. So transparency is critical to them. They want to know what's going on. They want to know, how much are we spending? What is our money earning us? What difference is this money making in the countries where we have asked you to work? But in addition to that, you've asked us, how really do you decide whether you need more or you limit? We have clearly identified roles for each of these partners. And it is against those roles that we developed an accountability framework which was sent to them. They adopted it and agreed to report using that accountability framework every quarter. And then every 6 months, we report in plenary to the steering committee that's made up of 1 representative and an alternate. So everybody knows what's going on in their space. However, we need to be very sensitive to bringing in 2, 3 companies that are working on exactly the same diagnostic or the same product, because it becomes a big headache. Yes.
So I have a few things to add to that. I think one of the challenges is having, private sector guys are busy. They don't have a lot of time to read big reports on all the great things that you've been able to do together. So really distilling information and results into, lovely sound bites, that always helps. Having a really lovely website that can keep that information and those results kind of surfaced and circulating. Having decentralized coordination structures, so we had teams in 5 different countries that worked quite closely with a lot of these different companies, and then something that we heard back from the companies was professional. They wanted professional contact. I used to be a Peace Corps volunteer many years ago, and we heard from some of the partners, we don't want the Peace Corps approach. We want to be talking to people who understand us and who we understand. And we took that to heart. And then finally, one of the things that has led us to improve, not only on coordination, but I think on sustaining involvement, has been a real personal touch. I've done a lot more with some of the partners than I've ever done with my project partners. In terms of socializing or, bringing gifts, even if there's something very small, just to say, I was thinking about you. I was thinking about you and this is what I brought you. Rather than it being this sort of one-way street of the obviously well-off company executives and then the NGO worker. I mean, you really have to shift that balance so that the power dynamic is shared. And so sometimes that means, putting more of yourself into nurturing those partnerships.
Claudia, now I'm excited to see what gifts you brought for your partners on the panel.
See, I got this nice watch.
So I mentioned in the beginning that there's 2 concepts that we at FSG have been working on and writing about. One is shared value, the other is collective impact. And I think the collective impact concept and idea and the practice of that has a lot of common themes to what both of you have been mentioning. And I'll mention a few of those. I think this development of a common agenda, and this relates back to the common sort of shared goals, that's really important. And it sounds easier than it is often. We spend a lot of time working with communities and different partners, even agreeing on what are we trying to solve here before getting to how do we do that. And that's critically important, because then that relates to the accountability mechanisms that you mentioned. This idea of what we call a backbone organization, you mentioned a secretariat, you can give it different terms, but a set of individuals whose day job is to really think about how do we coordinate, because that's a full-time job of multiple people, and that's really important. And then the shared measurement piece as well. Is there a set of dashboards that every quarter, including the backbone, the partners are reviewing and making course corrections, not just looking at the data and saying fine, but saying what do we do about this? There's a really interesting example that the Gates Foundation and DFID started recently, called the Africa Health Markets for Equity, AHME, focused on 3 sub-Saharan African countries. And it doesn't involve the typical private sector in terms of pharmaceutical companies, but it does involve a number of players, Marie Stopes being one, the IFC being one, Grameen being another one. And it's unique because DFID and Gates didn't issue a traditional RFP and said, oh, let's just see who responds. They were very intentional about saying, we need these players for these reasons, because they bring these specific assets and expertise and these roles. But then they actually let those partners, not grantees, but partners, decide what the activities should look like. And they've set aside a significant amount of funding as flexible funding, because they realize that 2, 3, 5 years down the road, there's going to be unexpected issues that arise. There's going to be need for new interventions or a new partner to be brought in. And that's another a very unique way of thinking about rigorous but flexible partnerships.
Can I just say something quickly before? I agree we need to have a personal touch with our partners, but I just want to drop the caution about gifts. Be careful, because it could also be misinterpreted. So I just, the personal touch, we're together.
Okay, thank you. So keep your gifts. Or keep your watch. There we go. Okay, well, let's open this up to the floor. We've got